What's up, everyone? I'm still Crysis, and guess what? I still love movies. Now, as I said in the January video, last year I saw a total of 107 movies that were released in 2024, 80 in theaters, and 27 on the various streaming platforms that exist. With how many I saw last year, I had set my goal this year to see 100 movies in theaters by the end of the year, and I was already pretty close by the end of May, with the tally being at 82. Now, will I get to 100 by the end of June? Wait to the end of the video to find out, but until then, let's get to the reviews for the 6th month of 2025, shall we? First up was a movie that wouldn't be releasing for about 2 weeks by that point, but courtesy of Screen Unseen, I saw The Life of Chuck, starring Tom Hiddleston, and holy shit, what a masterpiece of a movie. Everything from the story to the acting to the little clues about what's going on, it's just perfect. It's one of those movies where they have such big actors in it, and yet everyone gets to shine, from the big roles given to Mark Hamill and Tom Hiddleston, to the tiny one-scene roles given to David Dastmalchian and Matthew Lillard. The story itself is told in such a unique way that it captivates you throughout the movie. There's points where the story lulls a little, but even those bits remain interesting enough to keep you intrigued as to what's coming next. It was just damn perfect, and I would be more than happy to watch it again, just to see more and more of what I missed the last time that I had watched it. It gets the fourth 11 out of 10 for the year, and for very good reason. Up next was a movie full of explosions, gunfights, Keanu Reeves, and Ana de Armas, with a light sprinkling of Norman Reedus for good measure, Ballerina, from the world of John Wick. With this movie coming out, I became aware of something: that there are 3 certainties in this world: death, taxes, and a damn good John Wick movie, and Ballerina is no exception to the third one. Every time I watch these movies, I'm reminded that the main characters are just people. They're not super durable superheroes. They're not magically resistant to any of the damage their bodies take during the movies. They're just folks who got the short end of the stick life-wise and are now taking that out on people who deserve it. Ana de Armas steps into the role of Eve with ease and absolutely kills it, pun definitely intended, as the novice assassin out for revenge. The action is the second most creative in the series to date, with top marks for that going to the top-down dragon's breath scene from John Wick 4. Everything was believable within the rules that we've learned about this world up to this point, and those rules are still followed, which just astounds me with this many entries into the franchise. It was just pure dumb fun, and I would gladly see it again. It gets an easy 9 out of 10, and I'm starting to worry about the quality of movies for the month, because if they're starting out this strong, it can only go down from here, right? Marking my third Wes Anderson movie scene after The Grand Budapest Hotel and The Fantastic Mr. Fox, my next ticket was for his newest project, The Phoenician Scheme, starring Benicio del Toro and Mia Thrippleton. Honestly, it sits in a weird spot in my mind. On the one hand, it is a good movie with good acting, a decent story, and a stacked cast. On the other hand, I don't know if it's a good Wes Anderson movie. It had all of the classic tropes that he likes to put in his movies: the dry humor, the static camera shots, the admittedly beautiful scenery, but he repeated his jokes too many times for them to be funny by the end, and it was just too much at times. The amount of shouting in the movie made me think I was watching an episode of The Bear over watching a movie, and I couldn't understand any of what was being said, though I imagine that was kind of the point. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it was a bad movie, not by a long shot, but it just didn't hit the same way as either of the other movies of his that I've seen. On its own as a movie, though, it'll get a 7 out of 10 from me. The next movie I saw was supposedly a comedy, probably in the same vein as Friendship from last month, I Don't Understand You, starring Nick Kroll and Andrew Rannells. You know, for a movie whose genres were said to be horror and comedy, it was neither all that scary nor all that funny. It was just a meandering movie full of misunderstanding and misfortune. The only thing I really enjoyed about this movie was the setting, and that's really only because Italy is gorgeous, even when you only see a little bit of it. The comedy just wasn't very funny, and a lot of the jokes just fell flat for me. I don't know if it's because I wasn't the target audience, but the whole thing just didn't work. Nick Kroll and Andrew Rannells had great chemistry as the two husbands of the movie, but that wasn't really enough to save this one, so it'll fall on the steps of 4.5. Strange segue into the next movie, but damn, sharks really just cannot catch a break in media, can they? Unfortunately, the next movie I saw, Dangerous Animals, was no different in its portrayal of sharks, and aside from Jai Courtney's performance, this movie is just another sad entry into the slasher thriller genre, but even then, there's not really any slashing going on through the movie. It felt like they had to fill the protagonist full of stereotypes in order to make her likable and strong, but you don't need that for the protag of a slasher movie. The setting was neat, I guess, but that's about the only semi-decent thing in this movie. The romance subplot was half-baked, the story itself felt like it was taken out of the oven about 10 minutes into an hour-long cook time, and at the end I was left with a feeling of, damn, I really spent an hour and a half watching this, didn't I? It wasn't bad, per se, but it wasn't really good either, so it'll haphazardly tread water at a 5 out of 10. Another strange segue, but it's not very often that I have to get caught up on a show in order to be ready for a movie, but that's what happened with the next movie, Don Da Don Evil Eye. Now, as a continuation of the Don Da Don series, it is a great furthering of the story and everything makes sense within the realm of that world. The backstory is good, if a little rushed, the characters are great, and the story itself is amazing. However, probably my only gripe with the movie is that because they just compiled a few episodes as opposed to writing a movie script for the same story, it felt very disjointed, and you could tell where the ad and episode breaks were supposed to be from the fade to black stuff that happened every 10 minutes or so. It wasn't terrible, necessarily, but it was annoying after a bit. Still a great movie, though, so it'll get an 8 out of 10. Following Don Da Don, but staying in the horror genre, I walked into The Ritual, starring Dan Stevens and Al Pacino. I didn't really have much in the way of thoughts about this movie going in, but walking out, I really enjoyed it. Was it the best exorcism horror movie of all time? No, I don't think so, but then again, it's probably the second one that I've ever really seen. Was it still an enjoyable watch? Yeah, for the most part. The story was very grounded, following the more human aspects of those performing the exorcism and how it was affecting them. Dan Stevens and Al Pacino gave great performances in their roles, with Stevens in particular doing a great job showing the trepidation over the events of the movie as they unfold. The only major downside to this was the shaky camera work through every shot, even the exterior establishing shots, and especially during close-ups, which made it extremely hard to watch at times. However, the end of the movie made me release a breath I didn't know I was holding, which is always a great sign of a good horror movie, so it'll get a 6.5. It'd be higher if not for the camera, but what are you going to do with a movie produced by BuzzFeed Studios? No, I'm not joking. After a few days off, I walked into the first Western movie of the year in The Unholy Trinity, and unfortunately my view of this movie was absolutely tainted by the experience. The movie itself was actually really good. The acting was great from Pierce Brosnan and Samuel L. Jackson, as is expected, with Brandon Lessard doing a decent job in the main character role. The story was your standard Western story of revenge, gold, and all that good shit, and the setting was really beautiful, which is not something I would normally say about Montana. However, I honestly couldn't pay attention to about half of the movie because of the couple sitting next to me that were talking the entire time, on their phones the entire time, and giving horror movie level reactions to a surprise gunshot toward the end of the movie. Again, the movie was really good, but the experience I had will taint my memory of this movie. On its own merits, the movie gets a 7.5, but the experience is an easy 1.5. Up next was a remake that I'm still not happy about, but I'm glad to have seen it. How to Train Your Dragon. To be completely honest, I was never sold on the existence of this remake. It's too new, the original is so beloved, and it looked to be a one-to-one remake of the original with few to no changes made to the story. However, it turned out to be damn near perfect, a damn near exact shot-for-shot remake of the original, with just enough being added to the story to explain some casting choices without being too preachy about it. The acting from everyone was spot on, and the CGI looked amazing, with Toothless being his normal goofy self. The scale of everything, especially at the end, was amazing to see in live action, and I can't wait to see what this series has for the future. And for these reasons, it'll get a 9 out of 10. I still don't think it should have existed, but, that's just my opinion. Following that up was Materialists, a dramatic romance movie from Celine Song, starring Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans, and Pedro Pascal. First up, it was honestly kind of refreshing to watch a romance movie where the characters are able to have adult conversations that aren't just screaming at each other. Everyone is able to have a mature conversation with another character about their goals and what they want from a relationship. It was also refreshing to see a movie about romance and relationships be broken down into its fundamental parts and explained in a very formulaic way, which sounds strange, but it worked, so I'm not really complaining. Everyone in the cast does great, from Dakota Johnson's matchmaker to the handsome loner played by Pedro Pascal to the scruffy ex-boyfriend played by Chris Evans. It was such a great watch, though it did feel a bit like a Hallmark or Lifetime movie at times, but it's a romance movie, so that's all I think any of them are. It's still a good watch, though, so it'll get an 8.5 from me. The second screen unseen of the month brought me in to see 40 Acres, a post-apocalyptic thriller set in Canada. The thing is, though, this movie would have been a lot better were it not for the pacing issue that plagued the middle hour and 15 minutes. Starting off at like a 6 or 7 out of 10 of intensity, and then sitting at a 2 or 3 with random spikes here and there, to an 8 or a 9 for just over an hour, gets tiring to the point where I was almost checked out by the start of the third act action piece. Pacing aside, though, 40 Acres was a very solid movie, from the setting to the story to the acting. Danielle Deadwyler and Katayam O'Connor were the standouts to me, honestly, though that could just be due to the emphasis put on their characters throughout the movie. Overall, though, it's a decent enough movie, and one that would do well in the background if I need to focus on something else. So it'll get a decent enough 6.5 out of 10. A couple days later was an early access screening of the newest Pixar flick Elio, and it was cute, I guess, but that's how I would describe most Disney Pixar movies from the past decade or so. They're cute, but they just don't hit nearly as hard as the quote-unquote classic Pixar movies from the early 2010s and before. The story itself was good, same with the message, but it seemed to fall into the same blunder that Marvel movies have fallen into recently, cutting up serious moments with not-so-great jokes. Plus, I get that the two main characters, being Elio and Glorden, are kids, but my god, they did not need to fill every single second of those two characters on screen with dialogue. Sometimes, silence can help tell your story better, and this movie really could have learned a thing or two from that. Overall, it was a cute movie, but I would hesitate to call it great, so it'll get a 7 from me. Now, I have been seeing the trailer for this next movie for about 6 months now, so the bar was incredibly high, and despite only having watched the first 2 movies in the series relatively recently in preparation for this one, 28 years later was definitely overhyped in comparison to its actual quality, at least in my opinion. It suffered from a pointless prologue that doesn't matter until the epilogue of the movie, which just serves as sequel bait for the movie releasing in January. Overall, it was just a strange choice to have it in the first place, given how little it matters up until literally the final shot of the movie. Aside from that, though, it was a strangely human story given what's going on within the story itself, with a nice, heartwarming coming-of-age element that I wasn't really expecting given the track record of the series to this point. On a technical level, at least to me, the editing did leave quite a bit to be desired. The acting, though, was fine, with props going to Alfie Williams, who absolutely stole the show, Jodie Comer, and Ralph Fiennes. And the setting was gorgeous, showing us what a portion of mainland Britain would look like if left to nature for just shy of 30 years. Overall, it was good, but I would almost suggest waiting for the second part of this trilogy before watching this one. For these reasons, it'll get a 7.5. I'm tempted to give it a 3 3/4, with the second half waiting until January, but I'll be nice. Arguably, the worst movie of the month was up next in Bridehard, the latest Rebel Wilson-led comedy movie. And if you've seen one comedy movie starring Rebel Wilson, you've seen them all, and this is no exception. Filled with the trademark raunchy, seemingly improv humor that plagues Rebel Wilson's comedic roles, this movie is yet another example of something that should have stayed on the whiteboard of movie ideas. It also serves as a lackluster Die Hard-like, which should be apparent given the name, but it does everything in the worst way. Everyone is unlikable, there seems to be no redeeming qualities for any of the characters, and they wrote the male characters to be one of two stereotypes: himbo or sub, and there really was no in between for any of the guys in the story. Don't waste your time or money on this, it's just wholly not worth it, so it'll get a 1.5. Moving on to something a bit more exciting, and the only screen unseen that I can even think of that has been spoiled by the production company themselves, I saw Jurassic World Rebirth, and holy shit, they made the dinosaurs scary again, and it was fantastic. This movie went back to its world's roots as a horror/terror story, and it was great. To quote my own thoughts during the movie, I was clenching so hard I was making shit into diamonds and giving myself abs at the same time. The tension was palpable from the very first scene, and you could cut it with a knife the whole time. The story was decent, but then again, you're not watching a Jurassic World movie for its story, at least not wholly. The acting was fine, with specific props going to Jonathan Bailey and Scarlett Johansson in their respective roles, though the standout character had to be the boyfriend character that was just kind of there the whole time. Overall, it was a great watch, and I'm glad to now be scared shitless when thinking of dinosaurs. It gets 8.5 scary-ass dinosaurs out of 10, but I will leave them on the island where they can be in peace and not bother me. Keeping that excitement for the next movie, especially when seeing it in IMAX, I caught an early access showing of F1 the movie. I do have an actual review for this, but first, a meme. Cargo space? No. Cargo shorts? No. Cargo vroom. And boy did it vroom a lot in this one. While it was your fairly typical story of an old dog of a sport getting a second chance after decades away, mixed with an underdog story, it was able to do both of those really well. I was particularly happy that I was able to stop seeing Brad Pitt as himself in this movie and instead see the character of Sonny Hayes, the old dog brought on to maybe help his old racing partner's team be less shit. While it may have dramatized the sport of F1 a bit, it still held the spirit of the races, showing the absolute minutia that goes into making not only a winning car, but a winning team, along with all the careless mistakes and haphazard decisions that come with it. Overall, though, it was just a great watch, and another example of me releasing a breath I didn't know I was holding, though not a horror movie this time. For these reasons, it'll take home an 8.5 from the Midwest. Now, I just have a question for the next movie that I saw. How the hell did this get made in the state that it did? Hot Milk was hot trash for the whole hour and a half that I sat through it. From the rapid cut scenes that didn't give any of them any actual time to breathe, to the childish 26-year-old passive protagonist, the likes of which I haven't seen before, to the multiple plot lines that all end up going absolutely fucking nowhere. Everything just served to piss me off. Also, and this could just be me, but how do you have a protagonist be so stoic in what I can only assume was supposed to be a serious and emotional story? For almost the whole runtime, save for a few seconds here and there, the protagonist's face is just deadpan, but with long hair. I don't get it at all. Maybe I'm not the target audience for this, but I honestly couldn't tell you who would be the target audience for it. It gets an easy 1 out of 10, and I just want to move on from this absolute train wreck of a movie. Actually, hold up. Just as a side note, this movie never gives any indication as to why it's called Hot Milk, and it's just such a dumb name. Not a reason it's getting this low of a score, just thought I would mention it. Following that up a couple days later was the strangest sequel that I have seen this year, Megan 2.0. And honestly, while it's not as good as the original, this does stand as a solid sequel, if a bit predictable in its story and ultimate antagonist. As with the first one, a lot of the story, themes, and visuals are very toned down to fit the PG 13 rating, which isn't necessarily a bad thing per se, but it does neuter a bit of the impact of the story. It feels like a bit of a weird satire version of T2 Judgment Day, but it feels as though they were trying to take themselves too seriously, which was never my thought going into this series, or I guess franchise after January's entry, which, yes, there's a spin off that was announced after just the first movie, but that's neither here nor there. Rambling aside, this movie was just okay. Nothing more, nothing less. From the acting to the story to the set design, it was just solidly okay, which earns it a 6.5 out of 10. Finishing up the month of June, I went and saw a movie called Everything's Going to Be Great, and everything was certainly not great, at least in the world that the movie had created. For the movie itself, it was actually really good, with some heartwarming scenes that hit home a bit harder for me than for some others. However, given this movie's runtime, it didn't get time to breathe or have characters actually forgive others with any amount of sincerity because of how short most of the scenes were and how much time was in between most of the set pieces. We were also told so much about these characters, but they hardly showed any of it. The kid is a thespian, loves acting, so on and so forth, but we never see him act. The older brother loves sports, but we never see him do anything physical except for loading a car, but even then, that was played for laughs as opposed to any kind of character development. For an hour and a half dramedy, it was good, but it lacked any kind of actual depth that would have made it so much better. That being said, though, it did seem like a long hour and a half, dragging through a lot of the second and third acts. Overall, I enjoyed it, but I think it could have been so much better, so it's going to get a 7 out of 10. In the month of June, I saw a total of 19 movies for an average rating of 6.8. I walked into 3 of those movies, not knowing what I was seeing, those being The Life of Chuck, 40 Acres, and Jurassic World Rebirth. Although technically speaking, Rebirth was spoiled by the production company a few days before it happened. I only had to pay for 5 of these movies, but I still saved more at $193.76 compared to the $35.50 spent on tickets. Damn. To briefly recap the quality of movies I saw in order, according to me, we got The Life of Chuck at 11, Ballerina and How to Train Your Dragon tied at 9 apiece, a 3-way tie at 8.5 with Materialists, Jurassic World Rebirth, and F1 the movie, Don Da Don Evil Eye sitting alone with an 8, The Unholy Trinity and 28 Years Later tied at 7.5, another 3-way tie at 7 with The Phoenician Scheme, Elio, and Everything's Going to Be Great, a third 3-way tie at 6.5 with The Ritual, 40 Acres, and Megan 2.0, then Dangerous Animals at 5, I Don't Understand You at 4.5, Brideheart falling to a 2, and last and certainly least for the month of June, Hot Milk sitting at a 1. As with the previous months, if you want full reviews of any of these movies, make sure you comment down below and I'll get to them. After I get these movies made. So June ended up not really being a breather, especially as I got towards the end of the month. Now, I don't know if you've been keeping track or not, but the total count of movies seen this year comes out to, drumroll please, thanks, I guess, 101. That was my goal for the whole year, and I've already hit it in the first half. Don't worry though, there are still a lot more movies to come, with 14 currently on the docket for July, as I've already seen Jurassic World Rebirth and 40 Acres, both of which were slotted to come out on July 2nd. With all that said, I hope you take me up on some of these recommendations, at least the good ones, and see something that I saw. Hell, even if you don't, I hope you have a happy viewing.